Welcome to the Joe Schmo Show, where I talk about politics, philosophy, and a little bit of everything else here and there. This is the first installment of the podcast, so as you can tell, the visuals aren't that great, but hopefully the words are going to be more inspiring, more important, and catch your interest. I appreciate your viewership or listenership, and let's get started. So last Tuesday, New York City had a primary. The Democrats side is the one that's mainly being talked about in the news because the Republican ran unopposed, and it's New York City, so he has very little shot at winning. So you had mainly Zohran Mamdani against Andrew Cuomo. Now, for those of you that are not particularly aware of New York politics, Andrew Cuomo is the son of Mario Cuomo, who was the former governor of New York and a well-respected and well-known name. He was the front runner for a little bit. Turns out, with the ranked choice voting, and even without the ranked choice voting, Zohran Mamdani won handily. He would have won without ranked choice. For those of you that don't know what ranked choice is, I can go into it a little bit later on in a different show. I have opinions on that, but let's stay on topic. I love to go on tangents, and I'm trying not to do that here. So Zohran Mamdani says, following the release of the final results, which occurred today, quote, "Last Tuesday, Democrats spoke in a clear voice, delivering a mandate for an affordable city, a politics of the future, and a leader unafraid to fight back against rising authoritarianism." End quote. Oh, okay. Affordable city. I don't live in New York City. I have family that lived near New York City. Maybe a couple of members of my extended family that lived in New York City at some point here and there over the last several decades. It's an expensive city. You don't need to live there to know that. Okay, fine. What are you going to do to make it more affordable? He has some ideas. We can get into that, but it's not really important about specifically New York City. A politics of the future. Ooh, okay. Well, what does that mean? To me, that's just an empty phrase. A politics of the future. I mean, he's a democratic socialist. He's echoing the general sentiment of of progress. Like, what does that actually mean? No. What? This is what you have to look at when you talk when politicians speak. They say words, they say phrases. How much meaning does it actually have? What do they actually mean by it? And a leader unafraid to fight back against rising authoritarianism. Now, and he's been unequivocal about this, very open about this. I mean, he's a Democrat, so it's not surprising. This is obviously an attack against Trump because the Democrats, think he's an authoritarian. Not going to get into that too much today, but we will eventually. So this guy wants to lead New York City. I believe he's like maybe a year older than me. So good for him for getting to a point in his life where he could run for New York City mayor and actually be a candidate in the general election and quite possibly the next mayor. But it's the substance that matters. Now, I'm not going to get into the substance now. I want to lay the groundwork because the first thing you need to think about with a politician is differentiate, separate how they say something and what they are saying. Because I watched a video from NPR. I'll link in the description of the video or the audio podcast. I watched a video on NPR, and this guy sounds a lot better at speaking than I am. Well, let's put it that way. I mean, it would be different in an interview, but whatever. Very good at speaking, charismatic. He's younger. things that people look at that are appealing. But do they mean anything? You can have the most appealing, charismatic individual, and they are a terrible leader. I got a number of examples from history that I could mention, and I'm not going to say the first thing that came, first leader that came to mind. I'm sure if you have some background in history or any interest in history, you might know who I'm thinking of. Not saying he's that person, but some of the things he says, you wonder, because he's said a lot of things, or not said, condemned some things that he certainly should have. Anyway, what is he saying? He's coming from a socialist perspective. What is socialism? Socialism says the government should do much, 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 much more than what it is doing now for its citizens. How? By nationalizing, taking over industries or business in general, by increasing the welfare state, increasing the amount of money the government gives to individuals. One of the specific things he's mentioned is childcare, and free bus service in New York City, other things as well. By creating a false sense of equality or equity. The two words are different. I think they're too often used interchangeably when they have two different meanings, and I'll get into that as well at some point. But he wants the government to do more intervention in the lives of the individuals, more intervention in business, blah, blah, blah. Why does it not work? Well, it really doesn't work, and we have historical examples of socialist states just utterly failing because they spend themselves out of existence. They don't have... It's a problem the United States is facing right now, especially with Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security, things that definitely need to be reformed. Otherwise, we either won't have them in the future. I'm certainly not planning to capitalize on Social Security in retirement or Medicare, and I will not go on Medicaid. Just a personal aversion to utilizing government benefits. I'm not saying everyone should be like that, but I have personal aversion to utilizing government benefits that I don't feel are deserved. But anyway, the biggest problem with socialism is it has been said, it is great on paper, terrible in practice. I'm not even sure it's great on paper. Okay, so let's focus on one of the things he attacks. He attacks billionaires. Okay, billionaires. He says there should be no billionaires. Not a direct quote. I have to figure out exactly what he said, but he basically says there should be no billionaires. Well, what do billionaires do? Most billionaires are business creators. Okay, what does that mean? They employ people. What does that mean? They pay people. And in New York City, I mean, the wage is pretty decent as a minimum wage. And who's making minimum wage in New York City? You know, so you're going to tax the business creators, which mean more, right? Okay, personal income versus business income. He wants to raise taxes regardless. He wants to increase the corporate taxes on business in New York City anyway. But he wants to increase the individual tax on billionaires. Why? Because of an aversion to a wealth gap. Why is a wealth gap important? Why does it matter that someone has more than another person? Like, I'm not rich. Do I care that there are people that make inordinate times the amount I make? No, I don't. It doesn't affect me. People think that, the wealthier you are, the more power you have, the more influence you have over elections because you can finance a campaign. You can put all the money in the world you want in a campaign. That doesn't mean necessarily that people are going to vote for you. May get your name out there more. Might have more effect in a primary. But for example, in this previous election, no matter how much money that Kamala Harris was going to have to fund her campaign, she was not going to win because her messaging was not there. It was not what Americans wanted at the time. And hopefully it still isn't what Americans want. Hopefully they haven't changed their minds. But billionaires are important. I mean, not every business is created by a billionaire. There's plenty of small businesses run by people that literally just make ends meet off of the business that they run. That's fine, but do you want everyone in this country, every business in this country to be scraping by? No research, no innovation, nothing? It doesn't make sense. All right. He has a focus on the poor. Now, make no mistake, it's important to take care of people. It's important to look out for your fellow man. All right. But how is the best way to do that? By handing out more benefits to people? Is that really what the government should be doing? Is it effective? Right? There are a number of things that you can go into that would make the case that more welfare just creates more poverty. Right? People unwilling to work because they can get a government handout. I mean, there are very few work requirements, for example, for social welfare programs. And that's a problem. And it's a problem his side of the aisle chooses not to address, does not want to fix it. For what reason? And speculate. The more people get from the government, the more likely they are to vote for the people that want to give them more. So, does he really care about the poor and what's best for the poor, for the people that are struggling to make ends meet? Or does he care about votes? Or anyone who expresses the point of view that you should raise welfare to help the poor? Why? Why do you think that? Okay. And this comes back to how well-spoken he is. He's charismatic. The charisma of a politician might be important to some degree, but what's more important is what they say and what their intent is. Okay? How are they going to get what they want done? What do they want to get done? When it all boils down, take the smarm away, take the good looks away, take bad looks away, or whatever, What are they saying? What do they want to do? How do they want to do it? And does it make sense? All right. I think a lot of people will end up falling for something like Mamdani, his beliefs, his attitude, his political ideology, because they lack a foundation in they lack some sort of moral foundation, maybe. Okay. As we've seen over the years, the increase in the number of people that ascribe to no religious belief. Right. Now, Mamdani's Muslim. I don't understand how you can be a practicing Muslim and have some of the progressive views, but that's not something I can speak of as a Catholic. And of course, Catholics have plenty of Democratic politicians in office that do not ascribe to Catholic moral doctrine. Take that as you will, do with it as you will. But if you don't have a belief in something, I mean, maybe it's I don't know if it's overused, but if you don't believe in something, you'll fall for anything, right? Um, there is a serious lack of religious belief in society, and it has impacted society. People are worse off for it. Now, I do want to talk about arguments for the existence of God and maybe a little bit of Catholic moral doctrine and other things on this podcast at another time. But the importance of faith cannot be overstated. And I know one thing that sometimes puts people off about religion or faith in general is how others express themselves as a person while calling themselves a religious person, whether it's Catholic or Christian or whatever. People are not necessarily the best examples of the faith they ascribe to. I mean, obviously everyone has their flaws and their faults. I am definitely one of them. I'm not the best example of, being a Catholic. But again, I don't necessarily, I don't think that you should base your opinion of a religious belief system, the values, the ideas, the philosophy of that religion based solely on your negative interaction with people who call themselves a member of that faith. On the other hand of that, people who do ascribe to a religious belief need to realize that their behavior is an example of that faith to others. If they know you're Christian, like there's a song, I'm sure may not be a scriptural reference. They will know we are Christians by our love. Right? I'm not going to call anyone out. I'm not saying anyone's in particular is wrong or bad about doing this, but think about how you act and how that reflects on the religion that you believe in, on the faith that you believe in. I have to stop and think sometimes how my behavior reflects positively or negatively to others on my belief system, which is Roman Catholic. Okay. Speaking of beliefs, lack of direction in life, and what can fill that void. There was recently a study released about marijuana use. Now, I don't think I've really talked to anyone that might listen to this podcast initially about my views on drug use in general and marijuana specifically, but I am deeply, deeply, deeply opposed to any drug use, okay? Because it negatively affects your brain, your body, social interactions, okay? One of the things that um, people will say about marijuana is it's not addictive. It's not addictive. It's not addictive. Now, I worked in a job where people would smoke marijuana frequently at work. Um, Not the best thing. But it's fun. It was funny to me seeing that. Okay, and them saying, "I'm not addicted." Then why are you smoking at work? All right. It might not be addictive to everyone in the same way, in the same severity, but it is an addictive drug. Any drug can be addictive. Now, there's a differentiation between physical and psychological addiction, and certainly the addiction associated with marijuana would be a psychological one more than a physical one. But this study comes out and shows that there's more than just addiction. There's an increased cardiovascular health risk. Let me go to this link I have already up and go through a little bit of what it says. Now, this was a study. Sorry about this. Published by French researchers in the journal Heart. Okay, and they were studying particularly the relationship between marijuana and cardiovascular events. Okay, 400 million patients involved in the study. They did what's called a meta-analysis, where they take many other studies, take all the data they can from those studies, put it together, and find correlations where they can. Meta-analysis has its benefits and has its drawbacks. One of the very important factors of any study is controls. And in a meta-analysis, you have less control over the controls. So obviously, this one study, although there's 400 million patients in it, it points to something that needs to be further researched. But the fact that they did find a correlation between marijuana use and cardiovascular events is important. It points to the reality that I've been saying for years, that marijuana isn't this like miracle drug, this harmless substance that doesn't do you any harm. Obviously, since they say it's harmless. But look, any drug is going to be harmful. You're inhaling smoke. Smoke is not supposed to be in your lungs. It's harmful. All right? It's harmful in that regard. There's already been studies that link marijuana use to brain development dysfunctions. And if you know anyone that smokes marijuana, and I'm sure you do, how many of those people started when they were young? Middle school, high school age, right? It seems to me that the age people start smoking marijuana or doing any sort of drug is getting younger and younger and younger. And it's extremely sad. It's one of the outcomes of drug legalization, marijuana legalization. Does not make it less likely to use. It makes it a lot more likely. It makes it more prevalent. All right. Personally, I have never smoked a joint, never done an edible or whatever. I never done any of that. Okay, my two vices are nicotine and, to a much lesser extent, alcohol. Okay, nicotine, yeah, that's bad. Trust me, I know that stuff is addicting. Okay, and people want to say, well, you want to outlaw marijuana, but what do you think about cigarettes? Well, to be honest with you, it would make sense to outlaw cigarettes too, or tobacco too. Not the most popular point of view, but I am going to be consistent. Alcohol, however, is a completely different story, because, not to go off on a tangent, but alcohol in moderation has some, depending on what it is, potential positive health implications. And in moderation, the body is well adjusted to deal with alcohol. That is not true about nicotine. That's not true about marijuana. That certainly isn't true about harder drugs like cocaine or heroin. Okay? So I definitely am looking forward to a more specific study on the subject. We'll see if it ever happens. I can go into detail about why science and politics are being mixed in today's world and how destructive that is of science. The more bias you introduce, the worse your science is going to be. But I'm looking forward to maybe a future study that looks at specifically and with the controls that a clinical study perhaps might have on the relationship between varying levels of marijuana use and different disorders that pop up more frequently as a result, perhaps, or is correlated at least. Correlation doesn't necessarily mean causation, but that's why the controls are important, right? But it was interesting to note that they are linking these two things: cannabis use, marijuana use, and cardiovascular events. One of the other things they noted in the study was the risk to younger users. Now, interestingly enough, and I'm quoting here, one study pinpointed the risk among younger populations aged 15 to 22. Think about how sad that is, that someone as young as 15 is already hooked on marijuana or any drug, or vaping, or alcohol, or anything. Society has a drug problem, especially in the United States. I have some strong opinions about drug use, its impact on society, what needs to be done and what's not being done, and what no one really wants to talk about either. I'm going on about 30 minutes. It's much longer than I wanted this show to go. I appreciate you tuning in to the Joe Schmo show. I look forward to doing more podcasts. Hopefully, this was bearable, at least. You can find me on the different sites that I will link into the descriptions of this video. And I will probably try and put one out at least once a week, but I will try to put out more than once a week. And there will be, this is probably the longest it'll go for now. It's 30 minutes. And I'll give a warning in the future when I do a podcast that might go longer than 30 minutes. I would love to hear your feedback. All right. This is my first podcast. I know it's not great. I know it's not perfect. All right. But I would love to hear your feedback. What should I talk about? Give me suggestions on topics I should address, and any other feedback that you might have.